Well, there was a lot of hype this week when Apple introduced the new iPhone. It's a kind of excitement that often accompanies new high-tech devices, but you might have noticed that those gadgets could start to fall apart the moment the warranty is over. There's a reason for that. Manufacturers can make them that way sometimes. It's called planned obsolescence, and the electronics industry is not the only one doing it. Here to explain all of this is Markus Giesler. He is with the Schulich School of Business. Professor Giesler, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure.
Planned obsolescence, I mean, it sounds so ominous. What is it?
It sounds so ominous, but it's actually a very popular phenomenon. We're surrounded by it every day. It refers to companies' deliberate decision to actually develop and introduce a product that expires within a definite period of time, both aesthetically and even sometimes functionally.
Okay, so give us a few examples then of where we might see this happening.
Well, one example would be your cell phone. Another example, and a very popular example, would be the iPod. And the recent development of the iPhone is just another chain, or just another point in the chain of developments of how products expire aesthetically because we just crave for another one. We just want a new one.
Even though functionally they could still be fine?
Functionally, they could still be fine, but this is not the way the market works. You know, there are several reasons why we want new products. One of them would be that we're craving for new innovations. We are all worshippers to the holy grail of innovation. We're a society that sort of looks up to innovators like Steve Jobs, for instance. We all want that, and the stock market wants that. The other reason would be that, of course, we're curious human beings. We're all creative. We want to explore new stuff. And finally, there's this tendency for us that we want to be able to keep up with the Joneses. We all have our peer groups, our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, and we want to be able to demonstrate to them that we're able to afford this new cell phone, that we're able to afford this new car, and so on and so forth.
Well, you talked about cars, because it isn't just electronics where planned obsolescence is used.
We find that in all kinds of product categories, even buildings. We see that in buildings when a retail chain enters the neighborhood, they conceptualize the building to last no longer than 10 to 15 years, because the neighborhood might change, and so might the demographics. And that's why a building is not needed. Or a building that is not needed that lasts any longer than 10 to 15 years.
It doesn't really look trendy anymore after.
It doesn't look trendy anymore. The demographics of the neighborhood have changed. Maybe the chain wants to move on, and so on and so forth. So when we always crave for the newest and best, there's really no need to make a product last forever.
So this sounds like it's an easy sell. I mean, if we as consumers, you know, if you got one of the first iPods that were out, clearly now that is almost low tech compared to the kinds of iPods and then this iPhone that's coming out too.
Absolutely, and it's clearly a potential to embarrass yourself as a consumer with your peers. The problem is, of course, that innovation cycles have become so short that companies feel tempted to introduce newer and newer products. It's also the competitive pressure that they're facing on a global scale. And of course, that carries with it a lot of problems that then have a negative impact on our environment and on future generations.
This is what I wanted to get into as well. I mean, aside from looking like you're not really keeping up with technology, the downsides to planned obsolescence too.
There are absolutely a number of downsides. Now, the phenomenon itself is human nature. But what we have to get rid of is the side effects, what economists call the negative externalities, that are those aspects that don't factor into the equation, although they have a decidedly negative impact. And if we have a look at the landfills around us, they are packed full of electronic waste. Old TVs, old computers, old printers. And we have to find a way to really manage these things more responsibly and more carefully, because we have a responsibility for future generations.
Do you think companies are aware of that, or it's not really their priority, I guess?
I think it's becoming their priority increasingly, because the market and consumers, especially in the marketplace, are becoming increasingly powerful. So if there's a tendency for a company to act irresponsibly or unethically, consumers will find a way to communicate that on the internet, and so companies become increasingly aware of this, and therefore change their strategies, change their customer relationships, and also develop products that are a little more sustainable.
So consumers on there, and you're saying that consumers, that might be a consumer-driven thing, is to get companies to be more aware of.
Absolutely. We have to believe in the market in this because consumers really become increasingly aware of what companies are doing. On the other hand, companies themselves understand that there is no sustainability to this kind of approach. So in turn, they are trying to look into more sustainable production techniques, materials that can ferment or take back programs, much like Apple does this. So when you have an iPod, and I don't know about yourself, but I have a lot of them. So what I can do with my old ones is that I can send them back to Apple, and Apple will recycle them.
Okay. I've only got one iPod, but it is the iPod video, so I think I'm
really?
a little bit keeping up with technology.
All right.
Markus Giesler, fascinating insight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And as we go to break, Joltin' Joe marries the blonde bombshell on this day in history.